We gather as many drops. Quite appropriate for today, really, isn't it? Welcome to sunny Devon, rain 6 days out of 7. We gather as many drops by Leslie Takahashi. We gather as many drops, each winding our own path down life's surfaces and ruts. Here, we pull together as a single body, flowing together for a time. Together, we are a stream, at times even a river. For with our shared force, we can travel towards oceans of meaning and seas of connection. And so here we are. Here we are. It is good to be together again. Good morning and welcome to Plymouth Unitarians, an inclusive and open-minded spiritual community here in the heart of the city. My name is Gav, and I'm a frequent attendee of this space. Today's theme is the sea and me. And over the next hour, we'll share how that phrase speaks to us. However, we'll go into the specifics of how that'll work out in a moment. First of all, let's have our first hymn. It's Pete Mayer's Blue Boat Home. It was requested by Anne, a member of this congregation. In her own words, I first heard this years ago, the first time I went to GA conference, and everyone singing this was so emotional. It is a beautiful piece, so let's sing it together. The words are on the front of your sheet, and it's Pete Mayer's Blue Boat Home.
Low below me I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean. Still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun my sail and moon my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in our beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on, greet the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor's song. I was born along the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel.
everyone. And thank you, Anne, for the recommendation. Thank you. And thank you to Sheila, who recommended our opening music, which was Sailing By, which some of you might have recognized as the shipping theme to the theme tune to the shipping forecast. Right, time now to explore our theme, the sea and me. Put simply, I chose this theme as the sea features prominently in the daily lives of some of the people who meet here. In a moment, if you wish, I'll invite you to come to the pulpit and share how this theme speaks to you. You might wish to offer a reading, a poem, or a brief personal reflection. Basically, whatever works well for you. If the elevated position of the pulpit isn't your thing, which is perfectly understandable, please use the lectern. Whichever you use, I would ask you to be mindful to project your voice. After all, we're keen to hear what it is you'd like to share. Over the course of our time together, there will be 3 rounds of sharing, or 3 opportunities to say what you'd like to say. So, what I'm saying is, there's no rush. As I've said before, embrace Devon time and speak if and when you feel ready. I'll pepper music chosen by you between each round. Now, during each of the 3 rounds, there might be some moments of silence between contributions. That's okay. Enjoy it. Those brief moments of stillness are in themselves precious gifts. Use them in whatever way works best for you. Finally, if wishing to share, I invite you to reflect upon Eleanor Roosevelt's famous words, "With freedom comes responsibility." So, take a moment and, guided by your own conscience, discern how you might wish to use this free space well. Let's all do our bit to ensure a safe, nourishing, and generative space for all. So, I was thinking maybe 3 to 4 contributions per round, and then we'll take a breather. Does that seem good to people? Yes, a few smiles and nods. Right, we'll do with that. So we'll have 3 to 4 contributions in our first round, then we'll have a piece of music, and then we'll go into the second round. Make sense? Great, thank you. So, the pulpit is now yours.
The ocean and what it means to me. I have lived near the sea most of my life. We are very fortunate to live near the Howell and the Barbican. When I've been feeling down or upset in the past, I have found just coming and being close to the sea, watching the waves gently lapping against the rocks, very comforting and relaxing. The sea is always changing, never still, like our moods and emotions. Sometimes it can be calm, not much movement, gentle, beautiful blue in colour, moving gently across the sand. Other times it can seem moody, angry, full of energy, grey in colour, waves crashing against the rocks, very high waves that can knock you off your feet. At these times the sea is dangerous. Many seamen, fishermen and tourists have lost their lives. Back in November, I was on the Howell with Stephen. After the service, the sea was calm, the clouds was grey. They made the sea look grey, but the sun was shining through and opening in the clouds, which gave a light reflection. Just a thin line across the water. It was very beautiful. We lived in walking distance to the Howell when I was young. So Dad used to take me and my brother up there after school. Many happy memories. I feel very blessed to have, and still am, living close to the sea. The sea can be a very enjoyable, exhilarating thing to experience, but we must also respect it because it also can be very changeable and dangerous.
Everybody, I haven't stood up here for a long time. Oh, you all look different from up here. Right, the sea. I'm very fortunate to be living in Plymouth by the sea. I've never lived by the sea previously. I was advised by a doctor in London. I was suffering from bronchitis very badly every year because of the pollution. So he said to me, Mrs. Brisbane, you better go and live by the sea, or you can live in the mountains. So I got home, I looked on the map, mountains, Scotland, no, too cold. Sea, Gulf Stream, round the corner here where Plymouth sits, yes. And then I got the Evening Standard, looked for properties. Wimpy's were building here. And I moved in here 1986, never regretted it. The air here is much better, so it's gotten a bit more polluted because there are more cars on the roads. The salt air that comes from the sea is very healthy for respiratory complaints or illnesses. But anyway, talking about the sea, of course, is much larger. It's the oceans. There's the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean, and I was very lucky before the pandemic struck that I could go on some lovely cruises. Nothing better to get to know the sea than on a cruise. It's lovely and comfortable. On the ships are huge windows. You can look out during the day. In the evening, you see the sun falling on the sea. You see the sea in all its moods. It can become roughish, as you were saying. It can be very calm. It can look very dark. It can look blue, depending which part of the oceans you are. Just to give you a taste where I was, I went on a classic Baltic cruise up to St. Petersburg, very lovely. Africa Explorer, very lovely, down the west coast of Africa, taking in Namibia. We stopped there. In Dakar, I got off, I remember. And then you have the desert, the contrast, and the oceans are over there. Oh, I thought, gosh, this is something. And then I went on a cruise to Egypt, the Suez Canal, Jordan, Israel, Petra, Jordan, yes, the islands of the Atlantic, very lovely. Cuba, Bermuda, and Jamaica, beautiful. Cuba, Bermuda, it's lovely, it's warm, the sea is calm, it's bluey green, just gorgeous. It was a bit choppy when we went up to St. Petersburg. Actually, that was quite funny. I liked sitting on the window and I was watching the waves go. And the boat was, going this way and that way a little bit. And when people were walking down the corridors on the ship, they all looked as though they were drunk, going this way and that way. Made me laugh. Even funnier when I went to the disco in the evening, it was still choppy. And you just couldn't stay on one spot. And I went this book. Actually, you didn't have to do many movements. It's the sea that moved you along. Yeah, very funny. But yeah, anyway, we were lucky we didn't end up in a very big storm. It was just choppy. And then during the day, I loved to go and stand by the aft, that's the back of the cruise ship, and you could see the ship left a trail on the water. It looked as though somebody had beaten it up with an egg beater, all choppy and foamy, beautiful. And then on the stern, you could sit on the stern, look out, and sometimes you saw nothing but water. And that reminded me of this poem, water, water everywhere, not a drop to drink. However, we were lucky on the cruise ship. We had lots of drops to drink, all sorts of drops. Very lucky. Not like the poor ancient mariner, poor soul. Yes, Canary Island, that was lovely. Oh yeah, and we sailed all the way down to Oman, round the Arabian Sea, and then we went up the Red Sea. That's it. Actually, it should be called Red Sea. We went up that way down again, and then over to Oman. Beautiful, quite different again. It was nice and hot, which suits me. I love the heat. Lovely. I went to St. Helena, where my friend Patty's from. That island, bang in the middle of the ocean. It's a volcanic island. And the people there are poor. They can't grow anything because it's too slopey. And West Africa, yes, I mentioned Mediterranean, and then the Caribbean again. Yes, all right, dear. I'm going to shut up now. Anyway, that was my experience.
Brace yourselves, take the seasickness tablets. I'm going to provide a little counterbalance to that. I loved it. And yeah, it must have been a great experience. But this is a little counterbalance to that. It's called A Hurricane at Sea. We are having hurricanes in England. 90 miles an hour is a hurricane. We've had several hurricanes. But this is a hurricane at sea. I have sailed, not in a cruise liner, but in small boats. Sometimes I have felt like being inside of a spin dryer. And not... Speak up, says Marion. I felt I've been inside of a spin dryer and not all that safe. This is an American poem by an American poet, I believe, May Swenson, A Hurricane at Sea. Slowly a floor rises, almost becomes a wall. Gently a ceiling slips down, nearly becomes a floor with spots that stretch as on a breathing animal's hide. It rises again with a soft lurch. The floor tilts, is curved. It appears to be racing north with a pattern of dents and dips over slashes of dark. Now there are white lips widening on the wall that stands up suddenly. The ceiling is all rumpled, snarled, like a wet animal's fur. The floor hardens, humps up like a rock, the side of a hill too slant to walk. White teeth are bared where lazy lips swam. The ceiling is the lid of a box about to slam. Is this a real floor I walk? It's an angry spine that shoots up over a chasm of seething milk, cold, churned, shoving the stern around. There's the groaning sound of a cauldron about to buckle, maybe break. A blizzard of glass and lace shines, shivers over this dodging box. It glides up the high, hissing Alp, halts on top, but the top turns hollow. And while the hollow spins, I run down a slope and feel like twins, one leg northeast, one west. The planks pitch leeward, level an instant, then rear back to a flat, stunned rest. It's frightening, that vacant moment. I feel the floor beneath the floor, real, while a thickening wilderness is shunted aft under. I'm in a bottle becalmed, but a mountain bloats ahead, ready to thunder on it. The floor is rushed into the pit. Maybe there's no bottom to it. I'm buried in a quarry, locked in a booking room or bottle or box, near cracking, that's knocked about in a black, enormous, heavy, quaking room. Is there a bottom to it? I'm glad not to have to know. Boulders, canyon high, smashed down on the prow, are shattered to snow and shouldered off somehow. Tossed out again on top, topside bounce like a top to scoot the bumpy floor. Out there, it's slicked to a plane almost already, though chopped with white to the far baseboard. The ceiling is placing itself right, getting steadier, licking itself smooth. The keel takes the next swollen hills along their backs like a little dog gripped to a galloping horse, slipping once in a while, but staying on. Enjoy the trip. I'm just saying we don't take that element lightly. It's big, It's frightening. It's very powerful. And we are sometimes in the grip of it, and we don't need to forget those things.
So for our final contribution of this round, I've been asked to read something produced by Steve, and it's called Blue Health by Steve Finney. I've lived in Plymouth since 1988 due to my family serving in the Navy. Previously, I lived in Scotland, and the only weather aspect I miss about being up north is the snow. You get really pathetic snowflakes in Plymouth, maybe once a year. But in Scotland, it really snows, and it is truly beautiful to walk in, almost magical. However, the reality is that I prefer the warmer climes of Plymouth, and particularly our proximity to the sea. I love being by the sea, not only in our wonderful ocean city, but Devon, and especially Cornwall, which is literally on our doorstep and has over 300 beaches, with the longest coastline in Britain. We are truly privileged to live in such an area of outstanding beauty. I would even say that perhaps we take the beauty of this region for granted, and are no longer awed by it the way the tourists are when they first visit the West Country for the first time. It's a bit like living in Spain or Greece. 6 straight months of sunshine each year doesn't quite thrill them the way it should for us sun-starved lily-white Brits. Living by the sea can have a huge positive impact on your physical as well as mental health and well-being. And this term is referred to as blue health. It has even been called vitamin C, the word, not the letter. The seaside means more sunlight and less pollution in the air, as it's usually cleaner and fresher due to the higher levels of oxygen. We have healthier lifestyle choices, as people who live by the sea tend to be more physically active, partaking in multiple activities including walking, swimming, surfing, kayaking, sailing, or paddleboarding. I work with several brave souls who regularly go sea swimming throughout the year, and I always see people in the waters off the Hoe on my walks. It is apparently an activity which many people living with depression can find to be helpful. The colour blue is calming and peaceful, as staring at the sea can change your brainwave frequency and lull you gently into a wonderful Zen moment. Listening to the sound of the waves as they ebb and flow can also calm an anxious or overthinking mind. The sea air is full of negative ions, which alleviate depression and both increase and enhance sleep quality. Sunbathing as well, in moderation of course and with adequate sunscreen, is also a wonderful mood booster and a source of vitamin D. 3 of my favourite seaside locations to visit are Torquay in Devon, and Mount Edgecombe and St Ives in Cornwall. In the summer, I like to visit Tor Abbey and then walk along Torquay Promenade. On a really hot day, it can be, dare I say it, or am I really pushing my luck, almost glamorous. I can imagine excited holidaymakers in the 1950s soaking up the rays in Torquay's glory days, or Agatha Christie dreaming up murders for Miss Marple or Poirot to solve. Perhaps Agatha Christie was inspired by living beside the seaside in Torquay and Greenway. One of my favourite novels of hers is Evil Under the Sun, inspired by her visits to Burr Island. This location also allegedly inspired another of her most well-known novels, And Then There Was None. Agatha Christie was an avid surfer in the 1920s. Believe it or not, and she is thought to be the first woman to surf standing up. She also loved sea bathing off Torquay, and in 2024 there was a fundraiser for sports relief which enacted her favourite swim from Meadfoot Beach. In the summer, I love to get the ferry to Mount Edgecombe Country Park and walk around the beautiful grounds, followed by an ice-cold drink in the Orangery Garden Cafe, and stunning St Ives in Cornwall, full of German tourists whenever I visit. Did you know that about 350,000 Germans visit Cornwall each year, spending 130 million, mainly due to the popularity of Pilcher in Germany? St Ives is, however, perhaps best known as a haven for artists, such as Barbara Hepworth. It became an artist colony in the 19th century due to the special quality of the lighting and mild climate. In the 1870s, the railway line was extended from Paddington to Penzance, connected the world to the Cornish peninsula. Soon artists flocked to both St Ives and Newlyn, and by the 1890s, it was a popular destination for artists across the world. So, next time you are by the sea, give her a wave, appreciate the view, and remember the blue health benefits of living beside her. So we'll have our first pause point. And in our first pause point, it'll give us a moment just to sit with what's been shared and to express our gratitude as well for the variety of contributions. And after that, we'll have some music. Okay. That was Floating by the Wrong Janice, which was my contribution towards the service this morning. So we'll now enter our second round of sharing. And as before, the invitation, if you so wish, is to come and offer your reflections on how the theme, the sea and me, speaks to you. The pulpit is yours.
What wonderful things we've already heard about the sea. I'd like to share some of my thoughts with you on the sea and me. None of us, not even the person living in the furthest inland place on earth, would exist without the sea. Without the seas and the oceans, life as we know it could not exist on this planet. The waters cover over 70% of its surface, regulating the climate and the weather patterns. They're home to many species of wildlife, ranging from microscopic organisms to some of the biggest creatures on this planet. The microscopic plankton living within it generate at least half of the planet's oxygen. For us humans, the seas provide food and livelihoods for millions of people worldwide. They provide transportation for trade and contribute to worldwide economy through tourism, food and other industries, and unique recreational activities. The seas in some way connect us all, and the Unitarian project which Gav and his colleague have set up enables all the Unitarians who live in coastal communities around this country to link up occasionally, and it's wonderful to see these people from other coastal places. Speaking personally, for most of my life, I have lived within a few miles of the sea. As a toddler, growing up in South Hampshire, my mother often took me to our nearest beach, a wide expanse of shingle with views across to the Isle of Wight. I can still recall the thrill as we caught our first glimpse of the sun sparkling on the waves as we neared the shore. We spent many happy hours on that beach, with me transferring the pebbles to my pram, and as fast as I filled it, my mother emptying them from the other side so she couldn't fit me back in for the ride home. A few years later, we would visit a nearby creek with other mums and children to paddle at low tide. My mother, who grew up in a big city in Central Europe, far from the sea, was fascinated by the tides, and she often remarked on them to my father. We then lived only a few miles from Southampton Water, which has 4 tides a day, and I won't go into all the mechanics of it now, but if anybody's interested, I have a whole page full to show you over coffee. So the 4 tides a day meant that shipping was practically non-stop. On winter nights, we could hear the ships and liners like the Queen Mary sounding their foghorns as they navigated their way to and from the port. When the weather was rough, I'm used to this sort of weather, my mother was convinced that the paintings of sailing boats on our walls went askew, and she would say, "God help the sailors on a night like tonight." And I still think that to this day. Although we didn't go swimming or sailing, the sea was always there, a living presence in the background. When I moved away to Surrey for work, I really missed it, and I looked forward to the weekends when a boyfriend drove us for a day out to coastal places like Brighton or New Haven. The sea also provided me with a living when I moved to Plymouth over 50 years ago and was fortunate enough to obtain a position at Marine Labs at West Hoe. Sometimes the work involved sampling trips on small boats across the Sound and up the Tamar estuary. We went up as far as Coat Heel. At others, my boss would announce, "It's a 0.2 on Tuesday, so we're going sampling." A 0.2 meant a very low tide, ideal for collecting mussels from the shores of the liner or from Whitsand Bay, where we had to climb down the steep coastal paths to collect the molluscs. The climb back, carrying a bucket full of them, was very hard going. I don't think I could do it now. Less strenuous were occasional walks across the Hoe to see colleagues at the neighbouring MBA, and time to enjoy the magnificent views across Plymouth Sound. For several years, we had a project going which meant that we took samples from the Humber, and we went on a small boat up the Humber estuary. It was often quite rough, especially when we approached the mouth, which was so wide you could hardly see the shore on either side, and it crossed over the meridian point. And I used to tease my friends, but saying, as we go over the meridian, you can feel a definite bump. And sometimes it was very bumpy. But those days are behind me now. My pension from the labs enables me to enjoy my retirement. The sea continues to provide for me every day of my life, and I give thanks for it.
On a much lighter note, I settled to write something deeply profound about my love of the sea, but just then I had a call from a local friend who is busy with a paid commission to knit a traditional fisherman's jumper, a Guernsey, Jersey or Guernsey. Growing up in Looe, I remembered how important this traditional and practical item was, because the sea meant every day affected every aspect of our life. The frocks, or also known as knit frocks, they were based on local patterns produced by wives and mothers for the fishermen down generations. It was said if a fisherman drowned, the authorities knew where he lived from the pattern on the Guernsey, which is half myth and half truth. In each of these patterns, however, while the designs and motifs might vary, a common thread was the embodiment of a region's history, their culture, and their relationship with the sea. One such jumper, actually from the island of Guernsey itself, was included in the 2010 BBC project, A History of the World in 100 Objects. They stand as a testament to the craftsmanship and storytelling prowess of the fishing communities that created them. 24 principal patterns have been identified in Cornwall alone, inspired mostly by ropes, chains, waves, nets, herringbone patterns, anchors, etc. Guernseys were dark navy blue, using the dye natural indigo as the only dye available until the late 1800s, and were knitted in one piece on the round using 5 steel needles and 5-ply worsted wool. As a small child, I had no deep understanding of the history then of these coats, but accepted this was the dress code of the fishermen, winter or summer, worn even under suits at weddings and funerals, but found their image as just a little bit frightening. As you might imagine, they looked like sort of some really somber, serious men when you were about 3 years old. These thoughts reminded me of the superstitions of the Looe fishermen, some common across the country, but others unique. I've tried to remember some now, having clearly learned to abide by their rules when small. Clearly whistling on board was forbidden, as it was said to challenge the wind out at sea, bringing on strong gales and causing treacherous conditions for the crew. The local fishing boats would not in those days go off to sea on a Sunday, a cause of the Newlyn riots of 1896 involving the East Coast fishermen who didn't quite understand our Methodist base. Sunday was reserved for chapel. The inclusion of a minister or parson on the fishing boat was then a definite no-no, as considered very unlucky indeed and would cause poor catches. An interesting word for fear of Friday the 13th, Frigatrixida is cobbled together from Frigg, the Norse goddess, whom Friday is named after, and trisketophobia, which means the fear of the number 13. Whatever the origin, Frigg's Day or Friday was also seen as unlucky, as it was said to be the day that Jesus was crucified. This meant no newly built boat would be launched on a Friday, and the fishing season, a new fishing season, could not begin on a Friday. Women were not to board any of the fishing boats as considered unlucky. I always yearned to travel on the dear little ferry from East to West Loo when I was tiny, but my mother always insisted we walked. It was unlucky. Certain flowers were not acceptable. I would pick purple or white lilac, only to be told it was unlucky. The trees favoured by fairies who in olden times were wild and believed to kidnap people, so having the flowers indoors could lure the fairies in. No way could I draw and paint the lovely robin redbreast, and my Christmas card containing such a depiction never made it to the string of cards hanging indoors, and I suspect probably went on the fire. If a robin entered your house at any time of the year other than November, it heralded death in the house, and this extended to their picture entering the home via a Christmas card. You were never to wish a fisherman good luck, just as he set sail, as that would ensure a poor catch. I left Lou aged 7 to live in Falmouth, but aged about 9, returned to stay with relatives for a week in the summer holidays, and was given a shilling in case there were items I needed. One afternoon, walking along the quay on my own, I noticed a sign saying free entry for children outside a large building, with a rather long worded sign which said Lou Rabbit Trees. Happily, I never knew at that age the purpose of the building. I ventured in and found myself in the amazing world of endless bunny rabbits of such variety and colour. On the way out, there was a little shop selling lovely fluffy rabbit tails. I spent sixpence, I think, a truly large sum at the time, and with the fluffy bundle housed in a paper bag, I ran and skipped my way up the steep hill to where I was staying with my aunt and uncle. I shot in the open door, waving my paper bag and announcing they could all see my lovely rabbit's tail and could hold it if they wished. I'm not really sure even now how swiftly I arrived in the garden or by what means, but the paper bag and the rabbit's tail were never seen again. The devil was believed to disguise himself as a rabbit. Bunny, bunny rabbit, or just rabbit were words that must never be mentioned at sea or on shore as unlucky and one of the biggest superstitions of the fishermen of Lou.
When when Gav asked me to do this about the sea and me, I told him that I could not do this as I don't come from around here. I get seasick on boats and I can't swim. Also, where I used to live is one of the furthest parts away from the country, from the coast. So I know nothing about the sea. Gav thought that this was great and I should still do it. So I will talk today, but not about my relationship with the sea. I truly believe that seawater can store information. If a speedboat or a cruise boat drives across the sea, it makes small waves or disruptions in the water behind it. If you watch, these lines get wider and wider, moving further and further away from the boat. I believe that the information of what has caused the disruption is held, recorded like a memory in the waves. Information such as the size and weight of the speedboat, its speed, and the time of the disruption, as this information is live and changeable due to anything being added into the circumstances. Yet it will all be recorded in the water, like electrical information is in the cloud or the internet, just like the Akashic records. I would suggest that if you threw a pebble into the sea, it would create waves of energy in the water, emitting like concentric circles. from where the stone entered the water, like broadcast waves from a tower. These circles have all the same information: how big the stone was, what time it hit the water, and at what speed. Absolutely unique to that situation. No two circles from two pebbles are the same, like no two snowflakes are the same, like no two fingerprints are the same, because the energy and the information recorded is unique. If you threw two stones into the sea, they could create rings, and where these rings collide with each other, the information is shared. This is limitless, again, like your fingerprints. I've been told that our bodies are 70% water, and I've been told that our planet is 70% water. Now, if you want to do this, you can do this. You can go into YouTube and type in "water has a memory" and discover a scientist called Dr. Masaru Emoto. And he has studied water crystals for 15 years. Discovered that the water has a memory. He would take water and freeze it for 3 hours, then take it out at an environment of about -5 degrees centigrade. As the temperature rises, the crystals form and grow. He quickly takes photographs of the crystals in the water. He noticed that the water from natural sources had beautiful geometrical and symmetrical crystals. Yeah, all uniquely different from each other. But the tap water had distorted crystals. Water from a dam was taken, and it had disorganized crystals in it. And then a Buddhist monk prayed over the same water, and it had beautiful crystals in it. This scientist put water into containers, and he wrote on the containers words such as "thank you," "love," and "appreciation." And these created water crystals harmonious and beautiful. But the containers where he wrote "you make me sick" and "I want to kill you" had ugly, disorganized, and messy crystals. The water seems to know our thoughts, intentions, and words.
I'm going to have another space, and I know I shouldn't, but this is the poem I meant to read, and it so follows. I mean, it just so follows on what you said, and I think that scientific backup of that everything is connected, and what the patterns go, and they're built, then they're built in to what is left. This is a poem by D.H. Lawrence. Towards the very end of his life, when he was very aware that he was not going to live all that long, and yet he felt more connected with the world and the sea, that he didn't find a very a congenial environment to him for the rest of his life. He was a Midlander, you know, but he made this connection with it, and I find it very moving. As I say, it's towards the end of his life, and that he was able to feel this essential connection. It's called the mana of the sea. If you've ever been to the Pacific Islands, mana means the immanent spirit, the helpful, the healing, the spirit that goes through everything. And I think that was the meaning that Lawrence wished to connect with this poem. The mana of the sea. Do you see the sea breaking itself to bits against the island, yet remaining unbroken? The level great sea. Have I caught it from the tide in my arms that runs down to the shallows of my wrists and breaks abroad in my hands like waves among the rocks of substance? Do the rollers of the sea roll down my thighs and over the submerged islets of my knees with power, sea power, to break against the ground in the flat recurrent breakers of my 2 feet? And is my body ocean whose power runs to the shores along my arms and breaks in the foamy hands, whose power rolls out to the white treading waves of 2 salt feet? I am the sea. I am the sea.
Thank you very much, everybody. Shall we take a pause point? Yeah, just to sit with what people have offered. And then we'll have another piece of music. And this was suggested by Linda. And it's called Where the River Meets the Sea.
When the mountain touches the valley, all the clouds are taught to fly. Thus our souls will leave this land most peacefully. Though our minds be filled with questions, in our hearts we'll understand when the river meets the sea.
Like a flower that has blossomed in the dry and barren sand, we are born and born again most gracefully. Thus the winds of time will take us with a sure and steady hand when the river meets the sea. Patience, my brothers, and patience, my son, in that sweet and final hour, truth and justice will be done.
Like a baby when it is sleeping in its loving mother's arms. What a newborn baby dreams is a mystery.
But his life will find a purpose, and in time he'll understand when the river meets the sea. When the river meets the almighty sea.
I know Linda's not here today, but thank you, Linda, for that contribution. Thank you. Thank you very much. So we enter our third and final round of sharing. And I've been asked to share this by Nick. Those of you know Nick, he sometimes joins us on Zoom quite regularly. And this is his contribution. It's called On the Sea Wall, and it's by Ted Walker. Attending the first coming, expecting that some shudder of him should pulse here under me stronger than the knocking sea that throbs through the green heart. I wait for a faith to start shaking me. Again, nothing stirs, but I stay, lest I miss beyond the mind's wall, where are distances that never star was adequate to express, some comet fall of insight in the chasm of this night to light me my loneliness. And Nick has included just a very brief commentary to go with the poem or his contribution. Ted Walker's poetry, especially his first prize-winning collection, Fox on a Barn Door, is much influenced by his upbringing by the coast in West Sussex. I too spent my formative years, 9 to 18, just along the coast in Worthing. I attended the same secondary school as Walker, and he was a friend of my English teacher. The decision to move from Surrey to the coast was my father's. He loved the sea, and in particular dinghy sailing. He taught me and my brother to sail. As we launched straight off the beach, we quickly learnt the power as well as the beauty of the sea. Despite living near the coast, family holidays always meant at least one trip to the sea every year, and I have followed the same pattern with my children. My wife Jane and I were always going to retire from the West Midlands to the coast, and we bought our present home while on holiday in Torcross over 10 years ago, letting it out on residential let until we retired 7 years ago. The coastline here is constantly changing as the sea level rises. The experience of a February gale hitting the Slapton line should dispel any doubts as to the effect of global warming.
I'd like to share just two things. The sea means an enormous amount to me, and I love it and I hugely respect it. And when I was given an opportunity in my 20s, a long time ago, to do an Atlantic crossing, help build a boat and do an Atlantic crossing, I was inspired by Joshua Slocum's book, Sailing Alone Around the World, which he did this sailing trip towards the end of his working life. He was a real sea captain, seaman in the 1890s. And on one of his previous trips, one of his crew members wrote a little poem after a tough experience they'd had, nearly being wrecked on a South American shore. And then they were all so relieved to be safe and sailing offshore again. And this is night time. And Joshua Slocum wrote, "When a star came out, it came as a friend, and one that had been seen by friends of old. When all the stars shone out, the hour at sea was cheerful, bright and joyous. Welby," that must have been one of his crew members, "saw, or had in the mind's eye, a day like many that we experienced in the soft, clear trades on this voyage, when writing the pretty lines, the twilight hours like birds flew by, as lightly and as free. 10,000 stars were in the sky, 10,000 on the sea. For every rippling, dancing wave that leapt upon the air had caught a star in its embrace and held it, trembling, there." And I found that quite inspiring. Before we set off on our voyage, there was 6 of us, and I'm not going to tell you any of the rough, stormy times, but of a lovely memory I've got of one night being on deck, absolutely content, full moon up, and the course took us sailing down the moon path, this beautiful silvery path. And it was just the most incredible feeling of peace, of utter contentment, and that at one-ment with all the elements. And I knew the boat was safe, the rest of the crew was safe. So it was just wonderful, peaceful moments sailing down the silver pathway of the moon. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, everybody. I've been rereading one of my favourite books. Get myself together here. It's The Outermost House, Henry Beeston. Now, he was a great naturalist, American, and he built himself a cabin on the great beach of Cape Cod, which stretches for miles and miles and miles, 30 miles, I think, and it's the easternmost point of America. So the Atlantic is there, and then way over there is Europe, whatever. And he lived there, he built himself a cabin, and he lived there for a year, studying the birds and the insects and the plants and the waves and everything, the moods of the sea. It's a wonderful book. But I'm going to choose a little passage about the incredible connectedness of birds in their groups, flights and their migrations. So no aspect of nature on this beach is more mysterious to me than the flights of these shorebird constellations. The constellation forms, as I've hinted, in an instant in time, and in the same instant develops its own will. Birds which have been feeding yards from each other, each one individually busy for his individual body's sake, suddenly fuse into this new volition, and flying rise as one, coast as one, tilt their dozen bodies as one, and wheel off on the course which the new group has determined. Had I more space, I should like nothing better to discuss this new will, but it would take too long in this chapter. And he goes on to talk about, are we to believe that these birds, all of them, are machina, as Descartes long ago insisted, mere mechanisms of flesh and bone so exquisitely alike that each cogwheel brain, encountering the same environmental forces, synchronously let slip the same mechanic ratchet? Or is there some psychic relation between these creatures? Does some current flow through them and between them as they fly? Schools of fish, as I'm told, make similar mash changes of direction. We need another and wiser and perhaps more mystical concept of animals, remote from universal nature and living by complicated artifice. Man in civilization surveys the creature through the glass of his knowledge and sees thereby a feather magnified and the whole image in distortion. We patronize them for their incompleteness, for their tragic fate of having taken form so far below ourselves, and therein we err, we greatly err, for animals shall not be measured by man. In a world older and more complete than ours, they move finished and complete, gifted with extensions of the senses we lost or never attained, living by voices we shall never hear. They are not brethren, they are not underlings, they are other nations caught with ourselves in the net of life and time, fellow prisoners of the splendour and travail of the earth. Thank you.
I love this community because I learn something every time I come here, and I've heard so many things and learned so much this morning. Mine is not terribly profound. I was brought up in London, so Southend was our seaside. I met my first boyfriend on the beach there, which was really quite nice. And then I had what we thought was a very rich uncle who had a caravan at some point when I was a teenager. And when the tide was out, we would go to Southend, and when the tide was out, we would take our buckets and we would go cockling and come back to the caravan and cook them and have them with bread and butter. So it's not that profound, but nice memories. And also another memory, and I was in New Zealand last year, and I was sitting in Devonport in New Zealand, thinking of Devonport here. But one of my favourite poems, I brought one of my favourite poems, and it's called Tides by Mary Oliver. Every day the sea, blue, grey, green, lavender, pulls away, leaving the harbour's dark cobbled undercoat, slick and rutted and worm-riddled. The gulls walk there among old whale bones. The white spines of fish blink from the strandy stew as the hours tick over, and then far out,
The faint sheer line turns, rustling over the slack. The outer bars, over the green-furred flats, over the clam beds, slippery logs, barnacle-studded stones, dragging the shining sheets forward, deepening, pushing, wreathing together wave and seaweed, their piled curvatures spilling over themselves, lapping, blue, grey, green, lavender, never resting, not ever, but fashioning shore, continent, everything. And here you may find me on almost any morning, walking along the shore, so light-footed, so casual.
Thank you very much, everyone. I am mindful we have run over a little bit, but I was sitting there and I thought, well, what would you have taken out? You know? We've now got another piece of music. This was suggested by John. Thank you very much, John. And it's called For Those in Peril on the Sea. And you can see a version of it on your sheet there. Okay? Then after that, we'll have our closing words and we'll wrap up. Okay?
Eternal Father, strong to save, whose arm has bound the restless wave, who bids the mighty ocean deep its own appointed limits keep. Oh, hear us when we cry to thee, for those in peril on the sea. Most Holy Spirit, who did brood upon the chaos dark and rude, and bid its angry tumult cease, and give for wild confusion peace. Oh, hear us when we cry to thee, for those in peril on the sea. Trinity of love and power, our brethren sealed in dangers are, from rock and tempest, fire and foe, protect them all wherever they go. Thus evermore shall rise to thee glad hymns of praise from land and sea. Thus evermore shall rise to thee glad hymns of praise from land and sea.
That's us. Thank you very much, everyone. To those of you who offered contributions, thank you very much. And to those of you who helped hold the space for those contributions to be heard, thank you very much. Certainly, reflecting on our opening words, it does feel like we've travelled oceans of meaning and seas of connection together. Our closing words are by Amy Zucker. May all our hours together be blessed as this one has been, by open-hearted sharing and learning from one another. And may we greet everyone we encounter with the same acceptance and grateful kinship. Until we meet again, blessed be.